You know, it seems there's quite a lot that happens in the wilderness, whether it be the wildlife or the unexplained creatures the woods has to offer. There always seems to be a scare waiting around the corner. That's why on today's episode of Scary Stories, we're once again heading into the woods as we cover your true and scary encounters. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Let's begin with our first story, Cabin Intruders. Hey there, creepy fox. I've got a pretty interesting story to share with all of you that I hope you're going to enjoy. I just turned 13 years old, and to celebrate my birthday, my grandfather decided to take me with him so that we could spend a few days in his cabin. His cabin, by the way, was about an hour from the city, in the middle of the woods. Now, it is important to note that it's not necessarily in a private area, nor is it closed off, which means technically speaking, anybody could walk up to the cabin if they wish. There was once my grandfather had been staying there during a nasty rainstorm, and a young couple who had been backpacking in the surrounding woods took shelter with him. Anyways, for the first few days we went backpacking, and we made a camp about a mile from his cabin, next to a small ravine. Out here we actually caught the glimpse of some wildlife, including deer and owls. But that wasn't the only glimpse of life we managed to encounter. See, that same night, as my grandfather and I were roasting some marshmallows, we started to hear footsteps approaching. My grandfather holding a tight grasp to his shotgun as the fire crackled just a few feet from us, were suddenly interrupted by a couple of men. They were, I would say, in their mid-40s. Both were very tall, somewhere between 6'3" and 6'5". One of them was bald with a long, scraggy, ginger-colored beard, and the other had black hair, greased back with a ponytail. Anyways, they did give us quite the scare, but after they revealed they were just out here to camp, my grandfather's nerves were put at ease. Something about the two men, however, made me think they were up to more than just camping, but I let it slide as just my paranoia. After all, here we were miles from any civilization at practically midnight. Fast forward a couple of evenings later, and I was in the living room eating junk food, and I was watching a movie. All the lights were off in the cabin, with the only sort of illumination coming from the glow of the television. I forget exactly what I was watching, but I suddenly had the urge to use the restroom. Now, the restroom has a small window that's right next to the sink that allows you to look into the surrounding woods. It is covered with a curtain, however, but that still didn't stop shadows from being cast against it. Well, as I got up to wash my hands, I was startled when I not only see a shadow, but I hear what sounds like scratching. I quickly opened the curtain to see who might be there, and I'm met face to face with a man trying to pry open the window. And not just any ordinary man. He looked just like one of the men we had seen just a few nights ago. But perhaps what scared me the most was the large knife he had in his hands. I basically screamed like a little girl, and I run to my grandfather's room, where I wake him up, and he almost has a full-on panic attack. Sorry, Gramps. As I try to catch my breath and explain what I had seen, my grandfather just looks at me and then shrugs it off, as if I was joking. Do you even know what time it is, Justin? Go back to bed and stop watching scary movies. You're just hearing things. I'm not. I promise. Somebody was seriously at the window. Finally, I managed to convince him to scramble out of bed and grab his shotgun. Unfortunately, by the time he scans the property, the man was already gone. Just my luck. The story still isn't over, however. A couple of hours later, I'd finally convinced myself that the man I saw at the window must have thought the place was empty and then ran off when he saw it was occupied. But this was only a temporary sense of relief when around 4 in the morning, I am jolted awake by the sound of a door opening. It's pretty common for my grandpa to wake up in the evening to go and pee, which is why I first thought he was the source of the noise. However, because I was already paranoid from a bit earlier, I decided to sneak out of my bed and tiptoe my way across the hallway to my grandfather. It's in said hallway I could hear the noise more clearly. It sounded like people were whispering and having a conversation. I knew right away it couldn't have been my grandpa, which was why I quickly headed into his room and I grabbed the shotgun. Sure, it might have been a better idea to wake him up, but I didn't want to risk dealing with his stubbornness. After all, I still don't know if the people who entered were armed. Nevertheless, as soon as I exit the room, two figures are standing at the very end of the hallway. They were barely illuminated by the glow of the nightlight that was plugged into an outlet. That illumination was all I needed to see that one of them had a pistol in their hand, while the other appeared to have some sort of large blade. Safe to say I don't even ask what they were doing there, since I pumped the shotgun and fire, missing them entirely, as both then storm out of the house. "What in the world is going on? What are you doing?" my grandfather shouts, as he runs out of his bedroom and comes to confront me. I didn't listen to him. I ran after the two intruders, watching as they run into the nearby woods, where just 30 or so seconds later, a truck's headlights turn on, and they drive away. Of course, now my grandfather took me seriously, and I spent the next 5 minutes explaining what I had witnessed. We never did find out who those two men were, or what they were doing there to begin with. Part of me wants to think they must have been staking out the cabin for a few days, then decided to rob it for any valuables. However, because they had no clue as to the occupation status, they weren't expecting to be met with a blast of a shotgun. Anyways, friends, that's my encounter. It might not be the scariest one in the world, but I thought it would make for a nice entry in an upcoming wilderness or camping stories video. Thanks for listening. Number 2. How a wrestling move saved me. My story is a friendly reminder of why you need to be careful with those you stop for. Here's what I'm talking about. This was roughly 20 years ago, when my girlfriend and I had just spent 5 days camping in the Alabama wilderness. This was when we were starting to make the 3-hour drive back home. Now, since the road we were currently traveling on was still in the forest, we weren't exactly expecting to see any activity. After all, in this part of the Alabama wilderness, it's very rare to run into fellow human beings. Well, just as we were about to exit the woods and enter the highway, we could see a figure lying down on the ground. It was difficult to see exactly what it was due to our distance, but I soon stepped on the brakes when we both realized it was a person. "You don't think she's hurt, do you?" My girlfriend nervously spoke with concern as I jump out of the driver's seat and I start to make my way over to her. "Ma'am? Excuse me, are you okay?" I got no response, so I start to get closer. "Miss? Hello?" I bent down to get a better look, and then all of a sudden, her eyes open, and she lunges right at me. I fall to the ground for a brief moment as this scrawny and small woman got behind me and attempts to put me into a chokehold. She wasn't exactly the most powerful individual in the world, not that she needed to be. Without even realizing it, I saw she had taken a needle out of her pocket. She attempted to stick me with it. Those next few moments, I'm not even joking, seemed to happen in slow motion. Instantly, I thought of all the matches I'd seen in WWE, and I remembered a counter out of this sort of chokehold. I performed it quickly by getting up, and then pulling all of my weight in front of me and bending, then using her momentum to knock her off. This woman, along with the needle, fall to the dirt, and thankfully, I was out of the hold, but I wasn't out of the situation just yet. I start to book it back to the vehicle as I see a couple of men in hoodies jump out from behind some trees with large knives as they attempt to catch me. They were too slow, and I managed to jump into the driver's seat, where my girlfriend is having a full-on panic attack. Let's just say I may have or may have not run over one of their feet as we made our getaway. And that was essentially all there was to it. We made it to a gas station roughly 15 miles away, where we used their phone to call officers. Unfortunately, we never did find out what those three were truly after, and whether or not they were ever found or charged. but it's safe to say it remains a mystery all of these years later. Hey there, I hope you're enjoying today's episode. Before we continue, let's take this opportunity to thank my channel members, Robbie, Bo, Kim, Spunky the Nutcase, and our newest member, Tabitha. So, if you'd like to help support what I do here with getting a shout out in the videos and getting early access to new uploads, then make sure to check out the channel memberships. You can see it right next to where it says subscribe. Anyways, let's continue. Number 3. The Howl of the Woods. This happened to my friend James and I last summer, when we encountered something truly terrifying. Now, unlike most stories involving a creepy person, this one takes a different turn. I don't want to spoil it right away, so let's just jump into it. For quick context, I'm a female indie musician who enjoys both singing and playing guitar. If I'm not at home practicing in front of the mirror, then I'm at a local coffee shop, entertaining the wonderful people who stop by to say hello. Anyways, this one time I was looking to get some nature shots of me playing the guitar, and I looked no further than to my friend James, who's a photographer. I knew I could trust him, as his main focus was nature. Thus, it was a perfect match. We met up one day and we discussed this really beautiful locale up in the mountains that James had been to before. It's here there's an opening in the woods where you reach the cliffside that lets you see a valley below you. He even showed me some pictures, and it looked like a perfect spot for what I was envisioning. Thus, a couple of days later, we packed my guitar as well as a couple of other supplies into the back of his truck, and we make the 30-minute drive into the wilderness. Just as I imagined, it was quiet. We were surrounded by nothing but trees for miles, and just this all-encompassing sense of peace. I followed James down a dirt path that eventually opens up into a small field. There were a couple of large rocks, and even what appeared to be a treehouse in one of the older trees. You know what I love about this place? That treehouse. We used to camp here a lot when we were kids. Our dad even helped us build it. You want to go and check it out? Sure, but can we do that after we get the pictures? After all, we don't really have much sunlight left. As I hadn't gotten off of work until late, and this was the only time I had to take the pictures, we had to make sure we got everything done. Just don't forget the treehouse. It's going to come into play in just a bit. We walk another 5 minutes and we reach the cliffside James was speaking of. It was beautiful. Below you were able to see acres of trees being split by rivers, and you could see the sun just preparing to make its way behind some distant mountains, with the sky above it illuminating with a beautiful array of orange and purple. I can best describe this sight like something you would see out of a painting. After admiring the view for a couple of minutes, I grabbed my guitar and I sat on some rocks as James started to snap away at different angles. Once we were done, we started to make the walk back to his truck, and we stopped near the treehouse. But that's when we are able to hear growling. Please don't tell me I'm the only one who hears that, James nervously exclaims, as the growling is then followed by a howl. James, look over there. Next to some trees, we were able to see dogs, so we thought. Turns out, they were wolves. James and I freaked out, but we were smart enough to know not to run. Clearly, they were way too fast, which was why we get a bright idea. Let's climb into the treehouse and avoid being torn into shreds. We waste no time in doing so, as I drop my guitar and begin to climb, just hoping the ladder wasn't in such bad condition it would break. See, from what James had told me, he hadn't been in that treehouse in over 5 years, so chances are it could be unstable. Luckily, it supported our weight, as James now follows behind me. As we look back on this next part, we do laugh, but poor James was so embarrassed. One of the wolves manages to clamp down on the bottom of James's pants and begins pulling. I was in turn holding on to James, as there is this back and forth tug of war between me and the wolf. After about 10 seconds, James unbuckles his pants, and they go flying off like something you see out of a comedy movie which leaves him in just his polka dot boxers. The wolf then starts shredding at the pants as the other wolf heads into the nearby shrubbery. Moments later, James and I see the wolf that had went into the bushes, and it walks out with 2 wolf pups. It's at this moment we start to realize that perhaps we had made a mistake. If those 2 baby wolves were in some sort of den, maybe we had mistakenly gotten too close without even realizing it. Nevertheless, the wolves ended up leaving, and now my attention was focused on James. He had a nasty bite mark on his ankle, which was starting to cause him discomfort. Luckily, James always takes a first aid kit with him anytime he goes into the woods, so I'm able to put some disinfectant and clean the wound, and then wrap it up in bandages. Well, we ended up calling for my dad to come pick us up, as we were too scared to climb out of the treehouse. After all, the wolves could have still been in the area. An hour later, hungry and cold, both James's dad and my dad arrive, and they're able to get us to safety. James ended up going to the hospital just in case, and he made a full recovery. As for that adventure, it goes down as one of the scariest of our lives. Number 4. A grisly encounter. Most people go camping as a form of relaxation and a chance to be distant from the city life. Both my brother and I are no different, and this was set to be another typical camping adventure. We were to spend 2 nights in the wilderness, hanging out and spending time together. I just wasn't aware we would be dealing with quite a grisly encounter. On the second evening, my brother and I had just finished a long day of fishing, and we set up a campfire next to the quiet and calm river. Once we were full, we disassemble the fire, and we begin the walk back to our tent, a quarter of a mile away. Fast forward to around 2 in the morning. We were inside of our tent sleeping after a long day of adventures, when all of a sudden, I was awoken by the sound of heavy footsteps. These weren't the kind you would hear from a person. Oh no. It was clearly an animal making the noise, and it was huge, as I noticed the large frame of a grisly creature circling our tent. I don't even get a chance to grab and load the rifle I brought with me, because just a few moments later, a grizzly bear peeks inside of our tent. I froze with fear, as this behemoth of a monster stares into my eyes, with drool coming down its mouth. If you thought some creep holding a knife was scary, try being face to face with something that can literally tear you into shreds with no effort. I remember begging my brother not to wake up as the bear inches closer and closer to my face. Don't panic, stay calm, maybe he'll just take an arm or a leg. All joking aside, I honestly felt I was about to pass out from the pure adrenaline rush. The bear then does something unthinkable. It licks my head, before focusing its attention on my backpack. Inside I had some apples, bananas, and some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Seemed it was more interested with that, as the bear then grabs it with its powerful jaws, and then retreats out of the tent. A brief sigh of relief is then heard under my breath, as finally my brother starts to drift out of his slumber. "Hey bro, what's up? Why do you look like you just saw a bear?" I shushed him quiet as I put my hand over his mouth and began to explain what was waiting for us outside. The look of panic on his face said it all, but by now I was able to grab a hold of the rifle we had brought, thinking I would have to use it. Thank goodness that didn't turn out to be the case, as we take a peek out of the tent, and we saw the bear walk away with another similarly sized bear. We must have sat in that tent for what felt like hours, but in actuality it was only a few minutes before we finally had the courage to quickly run over to my truck and get out of there. It wasn't until a few days later we returned to grab our tent and other supplies. By the way, I never did retrieve my backpack, which had my wallet, sunglasses, and cell phone. So somewhere out there in the middle of the woods is a bear wearing sunglasses, using my iPhone, and using my credit card to buy jars of honey. Edit. A lot of my friends tell me that because of the scent of fish that remained on my brother and I, The bears must have grown curious and explored our campsite, where one of them found us. That does make sense, but I honestly was hoping the bear spray would have been enough to mask the scent of the fish. Whatever the case was, it's just nice to know we weren't their type. Number 5. Chased in the Alaskan Wilderness. My uncle lives in a cabin in the woods in rural Alaska, and I spent a spring break with him a few years ago. Just so you know, when I say rural Alaska, I'm talking about the nearest town being at least an hour away. That town being Seward, which isn't exactly notorious for being populated. Anyways, one evening I was having trouble sleeping, and I spent the majority of the early morning hours watching movies. I soon grew bored of that, and I decided to head outside to get some fresh air. As it was early April, temperatures were still quite cold, a chilling 35 Fahrenheit with a light breeze. Anyways, I first walked around the cabin for about 10 minutes, listening to the music on my iPod and looking at the moonlight above, before I had the smart idea to take a stroll through the woods. It wasn't like I was going off the path, however, as I was using the road my uncle had paved himself so that I couldn't get lost. I'd be using it to walk to my uncle's mailbox, which was about a quarter of a mile away, before, of course, returning back. I should also note I was borrowing my uncle's survival knife, just in case of anything. As I started to get closer to the mailbox, I was able to see something that raised alarms. It was a beat-up dark minivan that was parked at the side of the road, with its headlights on. I, being the investigative type, used the cover of darkness to inch my way closer, where I could see two hooded figures attempting to open my uncle's mailbox. It was the kind that required a key, which only my uncle had. As I stood there behind a tree watching them, my allergies decided to act up at the worst time imaginable. I did my best to hold it back, but I sneezed audibly enough for both of the men to immediately stop what they were doing and begin to scan the trees with their flashlights. They ended up spotting me. My adrenaline skyrocketed when I saw them take out pistols. They began demanding I step out to meet them. Naturally, I didn't, so I start to book it back to my uncle, using the woods as cover. Thinking these suspicious men would just leave, I was shocked when I began to hear the sounds of boots against dirt chasing me. Time seemed to go at a standstill, as every few moments I could catch a glimpse of the men, getting closer and closer. I remember tripping and scraping my leg against some tree branches, but I trekked on regardless of the sudden pain. Bear in mind, I was using my phone's flashlight to guide my way, but I had to turn it off, meaning I was practically in the dark. With the two gaining on me, I considered my options and thought it was best to hide. Thus I chose to hide behind a large berry bush, and I hoped for the best. It worked. The two men run straight past me, and they grow distant as I begin to breathe a sigh of relief. But why? Why would these two chase me? You would think being caught attempting to steal would mean they would leave. Maybe they didn't want any witnesses. It's hard to tell. Either way, I stepped out of cover and walked back onto the paved road and then to the other side of the woods. I then hugged that road until I got to my uncle's cabin. By this point, my heart was still racing. I was full of scratches and bruises from the trees. I ended up waking up my uncle, and he was just as confused as me, but he was more worried about getting the first aid kit. Once he patched me up, he told me to remain locked in the room. He then grabbed his shotgun and got into his truck and stormed down the road. About 15 minutes later, he returned and said that he found no one. He, however, did see some tire marks in the dirt, including some scratches on his mailbox. When I later described the two, including the vehicle, he told me they sounded quite familiar. About a week before I showed up to my uncle's cabin, he told me there were two suspicious-looking men driving down his private road. When my uncle stopped them, they claimed they were lost. He didn't think much of them, but he said it was quite strange to get any visitors, as again, he's pretty much in the middle of nowhere. Not sure why these two would think about robbing my uncle, but maybe they thought him being out in the middle of the woods would make it easier. They should just be careful, as my uncle is armed to the T, and his cabin is basically a fortress. Anyways, that was a few years ago, and my uncle said he has never had any suspicious individuals show up to his cabin again. So maybe they learned their lesson. Number 6. Misunderstanding almost cost us. Looking back on this incident, I can definitely say it was a miscalculation on our part. Maybe that's an understatement, but it sure taught us of why you should be careful of exploring abandoned locations. For quick context, this was in the winter of 2015, when my brother and I took the role of collecting firewood for our home. Normally, our dad is the one who will go out and get supplies, but he had been out of town for the past month due to his construction business. This left my brother Eric and I doing everything. We're both in our mid-20s, by the way. Anyways, we drove about an hour and a half out of the city in my truck, and we soon arrived to a set of woods that we had previously joined my father in to camp, and of course, collect the firewood. We went ahead and unloaded our hatchets, and we soon got to chopping. Now, if you've never collected firewood, just know it's a lot of manpower and tedious work, which was why about halfway through, we took a break and ate some of the sandwiches we had packed. "Hey, what is that over there in the distance? Is that smoke?" my brother exclaimed, pointing to what could have been a fire. "I never noticed it. You think somebody's over there?" "Come on, bro, it's the middle of nowhere. Do you honestly think anyone would want to be out here? Still, maybe we should go and check. Maybe somebody forgot to disassemble their campfire. The last thing we want is this place to be set ablaze." With that, we began to follow the source, and the closer we got, the more it was evident it hadn't been left abandoned. Not only was there a large tent, but there was also some water bottles and canned foods placed alongside the campfire. Pretty interesting to say the least. And as we take a look around, both Eric and I seek cover as a loud shotgun blast is heard. "What, are you two trying to rob me? I got you red-handed. Put your hands up and drop the hatchets." Eric and I do exactly as the voice commands, when moments later, we are asked to turn around. When we do, we see a man with a kid, no more than 10 years old, standing right beside him. "We don't want to be any trouble, sir. We're just out here collecting firewood. We promise. We didn't mean to intrude on your campsite." The man continues to aim the shotgun as both Eric and I are sweating and shaking. Finally, after a brief exchange of our innocence, he drops his guard and then he lets out a sigh. "Sorry, this wouldn't be the first time I encountered men in the woods. Last time they tried to take my things, so you can imagine my precaution. By the way, this is my son. I'm teaching him how to survive in the woods, and we've been out here for a couple of days." To think we may have never seen our family again because of a misunderstanding. Not that we really think he would have done the unthinkable. Now, if we would have suddenly went after both him and his son with the hatchets, that might have been a different story. But luckily it seemed that even he knew we weren't there to cause harm. Nevertheless, he apologized, and we left a few minutes later to continue collecting firewood. I know it's not your typical scary story, but I thought I would go ahead and share it nonetheless. Be careful with the locations you explore, friends. We got let off essentially with a warning, but you may not be as lucky. So please, stay safe. Before we get to the final story, I just wanted to go ahead and give you all a quick reminder. If you're ever looking for extra content, whether it be art, previews, or sneak peeks, then make sure to follow me over on my Instagram, @TheCreepyFoxOfficial. Thank you. I'll see you there. But for now, let's get on to our final entry. Number 7. The ghillie suits. This happened last year when I did a solo camping trip in northern Wyoming. I won't bore you with all the details leading up to the event, so I'll just get straight to the night in question. It was around 3 a.m. in the middle of the wilderness when all the water I had consumed only hours earlier hit my bladder like a handball hits a wall. I had to go bad. So I grabbed my survival knife from my backpack, put on my boots, and run to a nearby tree so I could let the floodgates open, so to speak. I stood there for a solid minute when all of a sudden I was interrupted by what sounded like leaves crunching and branches breaking. I didn't even have enough time to zip up my pants, so I quickly crouched behind some bushes and I watched a pretty strange sight. Two large people, and of all things, ghillie suits, walk out of the woods holding hunting rifles and begin walking up to my tent. One of them then opens my tent and does the unthinkable. He actually aims the rifle inside and then very loudly shouts, "Bang!" I thank my lucky stars for my bladder waking me up, because had I been in there, I don't think I would be writing this to you. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact I would have passed out from the panic attack of seeing a rifle pointed toward me, then I most likely would have been taken out right there and then. I guess I'll never truly know, but it's still creepy to think that these guys go around in ghillie suits just to give people a good scare. At least that's what it appeared to be like. Nonetheless, the two then laughed amongst themselves before walking away less than a minute later. I never saw them again, and to this day, I have no clue what they were truly up to. Better yet, if they were actually planning on taking out the person who was inside of the tent, that being me. Hello everybody, it is the Creepy Fox wanting to say thank you for watching today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to leave a thumbs up and a comment telling me what you all thought. Now, in case you're confused, you're like, why is the Creepy Fox on camera? I wanted to do something a little bit different. If you all watched the last video, which many of you did not watch it, you should go back and watch it. Many of you, for whatever reason, didn't watch the last video, but if you did, then you know that I did this kind of in-person, kind of one-on-one camera thing. And I wanted to do this just because I know right now there's a lot of stuff happening in the world. I mean, you don't need me to tell you what's going on. But, there's a lot going on. And I wanted to do a one-on-one just to talk to you all, see how you're all doing. So if you need somebody to talk to, just know that I'm here for you personally. If you need somebody to talk to, you could leave a comment on this video, leave a comment down below or on future uploads. Or if you want to send me a message over on Instagram, @TheCreepyFoxOfficial. Or if you want to send me an email at tcfnarrations@gmail.com, you could do that, and I'll make sure to try and get back to as many of you as I possibly can. But yes, that's the reason why I'm doing this. So I wanted to do something I haven't done in quite some time, and that is bringing back Comments with Creepy. It's the part of the video where I go back to the previous upload, which was the, I'll put it on screen somewhere right now, like here somewhere, with the magic power of editing. The ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend stories. I wanted to go back and respond to a few of those comments you left. So let's go ahead and see what you all left me. So the first comment comes to us from Haunted Girl, and it says, "You, sir, are one hell of a guy. Your parents did an amazing job with you, Creepy Fox. I love the channel, and it's so great to know there are still wonderful people in this world." Well, Haunted Girl, thank you. I really appreciate that. And when I saw that comment the other day, it really it made me shed a tear of happiness, because it's nice to know there are people that, like yourself, that care about me, because for whatever reason it seems like in my real life, my so-called friends or people that supposedly care about me, they don't really take the chance or the time to even take like 10 seconds just to say hello or how are you doing. It's really weird. It's nice to be checked up on. It's nice to be cared about, even from somebody I don't know. So Haunted Girl, shout out to you. Thank you for being so nice. Next comment comes to us from Jack. I'm going to go ahead and skip the first part just because it's not really that part I'm focused on. It's more on the question he left. He says, "There is one thing that's been bugging me. Besides the obvious global stuff and what's going on, what are those lanyard-looking things hanging on your wall?" He is referring to those right there. This is so unprofessional. These things right here. He's asking what those are. Those are actually medals that I've earned and I've won at the half marathons I've done in the past. I used to do half marathons from 2015 to 2019, and those range from Southern California all the way up to Northern California. Some notable ones include one I did in San Francisco in 2015. And then there is a few of them I've done here in a local area. And then, of course, you've had the major ones like Long Beach and Huntington Beach and Newport Beach. If you're from Southern California, you probably know what I'm talking about in the locations. But yeah. And then last but least, we've got a comment from Heather. It says, I think the message you left at the end of the video was pretty poop-poo, I'm not going to say that word, amazing. With everything going on now, I think it's got everyone a little on the edge. By putting yourself on camera, hey, you made your message that more personal. Thanks for the nice words among all the chaos and confusion. Yes, like I said, I wanted to go ahead and to do something a little bit different and actually appear on camera. I mean, I don't really like being on camera just because I'm camera shy, but I'm glad you all appreciated that. Anyways, friends, I just wanted to go ahead and say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for watching today's video. Like I said, if you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a thumbs up and a comment telling me what you all thought. And hopefully I will see you all in the next video. But until then, take care. I'm going to end it now because there is a helicopter flying above the house right now. And have yourselves a nice day. Bye-bye.